Like I said, production is broken down to execution and leadership. Those are the two kind of buckets that you oftentimes find yourself as a leader, as a production director in, okay? I think the best version of a production director is one who starts with execution and then heads toward leadership. Let me explain what I mean. I think a lot of times we can get caught up thinking that we just need to lead, be high level, and be up in the clouds sometimes of producing and all that kind of stuff, where a lot of times some of us need to actually come down and execute a weekend service. So that way, we know that we have a system that can be replicated. I think as a production director, you have to intentionally put yourself into positions for a certain amount of time in order to kind of set the standard and set the stage for how production should be done at your church. So if you are jumping into production at your church, or maybe you just got hired or whatever you're doing, I think something that's very important is to observe for a couple of weeks. Don't typically come in hot and heavy and change things right away unless it is an absolute mess. I understand sometimes we kind of have to jump right into things and get right after it. But I think too, what's very, very important is to observe and then insert yourself into roles so that you can actually execute what is being asked of you. I think a lot of times where there's a miscommunication is when there is a expectation gap between what you are expected to do and what the team and how the team is expected to perform and execute. So I think having that first and foremost understanding of like, oh, okay, this is what my leadership wants. This is what they're asking for. These are the tensions that we can solve, whatever. And then going from there to figuring out, okay, how do we actually accomplish that in each of our individual roles? I think a lot of times in video control, we see that one volunteer is operating lyrics, scripture, clocks, all the things is happening on one person. Now, is that reasonable? And is that actually reasonable to ask one volunteer to do all those things? Or is it better to create a better system to where you divvy things out and there is less stress on one person? I think that is where production directors thrive, is they thrive in creating systems that volunteers can come in, serve, and be a part of the church at a bite-sized level, but make a big-sized impact, if that makes sense. So again, that's where I would start. If you were to hire me as a, hey, yo, I'm hiring a brand new production director, I would want my production director to understand how things need to be executed, so that way they can understand how to actually, not just execute, but then how to actually build a team that can execute and replicate what they've done. I remember being at Hope City Church in Houston, Texas, and I did that very thing where I spent a good amount of time refining a lot of the systems, and I put myself into director and producer positions so that way I could kind of prove a model of like, hey, this is how we execute. This is the standard of how we do this. This is how we communicate. This is the wording that we use for each of these positions. And then that way I'm able to oversee volunteers that are doing the thing as well. And then I'm also able to keep us in check and keep a close eye and a close watch as I continuously step away over the course of a couple months. So I think that sometimes if you want to make a change, it's important to kind of insert yourself into a role or insert yourself into a position and then build it out from there. Write it down, standardize it, make it clear, give plenty of clarity around it, and then train volunteers to do it at that level. And then over time, what you'll do is you'll see that you'll get to step out further, and further, and the level of execution and the level of understanding stays at a high level because you were the one who trained volunteers to be able to do a thing. So execution is one of those things that is very important to a production director. I think the other thing is leadership, right? Both of those things kind of go hand in hand. I think, like I said, sometimes people stay on the execution side too long. Sometimes people stay on the leadership side too long. I think the perfect production director is somebody who can do both, is they can execute and they can lead. Okay. Leadership oftentimes as a production director looks like building out a team that is opposite of you in the way that you can lean on some of their strengths and they can fill gaps of your weaknesses and vice versa and all those things. I think strength finders, there's a bunch of different kind of IQ and EQ and whatever tests that you can do with team members in order to kind of figure out, hey, how are certain people wired? But I think that is very, very important as a production director to identify leaders on the team and invest and build almost like a lead team. That could just be simply 2 people. That could be 4 people, whatever it looks like. like. It can kind of change, but I think if you don't have specific leaders that you have appointed, that you are investing in, that you are pouring into, then I think you're just going to end up spinning your tires for a long time. I think good production directors, they establish those leaders, they establish and they train those leaders, they pour into those leaders from a technical standpoint, from a leadership standpoint, from a communication standpoint, because all those things are so critically important to what goes into a Sunday, what goes into a weekend experience. And the goal is to kind of get those leaders to continuously think the way and at the level that you think. Okay. And you as the production director, your job is to think at the level that your pastor or your leadership is thinking at. So if your pastor and leader expects this, then I want to make sure my thought process is matching what my leader, what my pastor, how they're thinking. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that thought process and I'm going to invest in team members and leaders first. And I'm going to multiply that mindset and how we see things, how we execute things, and how we do the thing, right? So that's very, very important as a production director, is to build a team and to build leaders, identify leaders, spend time with those leaders. And here's what I would do. Every single week, you need to be having a leader meeting with your leaders, whether it is an agenda. If you're super hyper organized, unlike me, you need to have an agenda thing where you go bing, bang, boom, bang, bing, hit all the things that you need to talk about. Make sure that those leaders feel invested into the team that you're building, into the volunteers that you're pouring into, and into the systems and structures that you're building as well. I think that's very important. I think also just from a pastoral sense, it's very important to consistently connect with the leaders and the people that are helping you do church on the weekend. Okay. Very, very important. So I would have a weekly leader meeting. If not, it could be 30 minutes. It could be an hour, whenever it is, over Zoom, in person. Maybe 3 weeks out of the month you do in Zoom, maybe 1 week out of the month you do in person dinner or something like that, to where you guys are getting together and strengthening the core of your production team. So building a team starts with leaders. The next thing is that you want to make sure that you build your volunteer teams A-B. And I know you guys have heard that 1,000 times, but A-B is so incredibly important, because we're not just creating a system to add more volunteers to our team. We're creating rhythms for people to grow, invest not only in the production side of what we do, but also relationships, and then be able to sit in church. That is so critically important when it comes to production, is for your production people to sit in church. If they haven't sat in church in months, that is a red flag. And immediately, I don't care if you're like, but I need this person to execute the weekend. Well, you better figure out how to train someone else how to do something like that. Give yourself a timeline. I've got 6 weeks to train this person to be able to do this person's job, and that person needs to be able to sit in church. Because again, I know that there are people who feel that weight of like, no, I got to serve every weekend. I want to serve every weekend. It gives me joy. And people can use that all day long. But as a production director, as the leader, you have to be able to identify what is most helpful in people's lives. And if they're not sitting in church, if they're not taking notes, if they're not worshiping God, if they're not sitting with other believers, that is like a core principle of what we do. And so you as the production director have to be able to guide and steer your team into health. Okay. So we're building a team that is A and B weekends, meaning that we want our volunteers to serve every other week. So that's kind of a little bit of the systems that you're building as a production director. Obviously, we talked a little bit about execution, sitting down in certain seats and doing the thing, but also you want to make sure that you're getting up at a high level to be able to evaluate how is our team performing as well. I think that's another thing to touch in on, is asking your pastor, asking other leadership, asking supervisors, hey, how are we actually doing as a team? Do you think we execute at a high level? Do you think we could execute better? Where are some of the areas that you think that we could improve? Is it audio, lighting, video? What are some of the things that you see that you wish you could just say, hey, can we make this better? Can we make that better? Can we make this better? And then and then ask for language around that too. Like, hey, when you say better, what looks better to you? Give me examples, give me ideas, give me things that you see that are better from what we currently are. And that's going to help you and your leader get on the same page, and for you to, again, think like your leader, think like your pastor, think like your supervisor, whatever that looks like. Okay. So again, asking more of those clarifying questions helps you create more of a vision for where your team can go based off of of conversations that you're having with your pastor, okay? I know a lot of us are producing special events during the week. We're doing youth, we're doing this, we're doing that, we're doing all kinds of things, right? I think it's really important to again, build teams, identify people and build teams to help you with those events. Because again, things go way out of, things get crazy. You end up being gone Monday, you end up being gone Tuesday, Thursday, Wednesday night for youth or whatever it looks like. So I think being able to build teams that can help support you in those things is also vitally important. Now, you might be saying, Shep, our system is so complicated, we have no idea how to, dude, I can't even make it simple enough to get that many volunteers or, whatever it is. Dude, write out a plan, take a couple months, write out a plan and figure out how can I simplify my system? Have conversations with other production directors in your area, maybe online, maybe whatever that is. How can I simplify my system so that way my events can be ran by volunteers? I think that is critically important. And there is going to be a learning curve to that. There's always going to be a learning curve for people who are serving in the church for the first time or the 15th time or whatever it is, especially when you ask somebody to lead. There's expectations that come with leadership. There's expectations that come with those asks. And so you need to be able to clearly give that to people. Okay. You need to be able to clearly write that out and let people know, like, hey, this is how you run a computer for lyrics. This is how you cut cameras. This is our philosophy behind how we do this, how we do that, how they do this. And then also same thing for producing. This is how we produce on the weekend. This is how we communicate. This is where we communicate. This is this, that, this, other. So you have to be able to, like I said, multiply everything that you do, write down everything that you do, and then be able to give that to your team so that way they can all be elevated as well. So the other thing as a production director is, what are my measures of success? How do I know I'm actually doing a good job as a production director, right? Number one is that I often look at is, do my volunteers serve consistently? Are my volunteers serving every other week, or are they showing up once a month? Are they showing up every now and again? How often are my volunteers actually serving? Are they passionate when they come to serve? Do they care about what we do? Are they involved in other things outside of just serving on the weekend? I think this is very, very critical, is seeing, do my volunteers, do they go to groups? Are they plugged into maybe Bible studies, or like I said, small groups, or are they doing things outside of just showing up to Sunday and serving? Are my volunteers attending church? Very, very valid questions to be asking yourself. And I think that if you're saying, no, my volunteers only serve on the production team, I think that could be improved. I don't want to say that that's bad or that's a red flag, but I think that we could improve that piece right there to getting our volunteers more involved in the heartbeat of our church and not just serving on the production team. Because sometimes I know the production team may just become like a little bit of like a cliquey thing. Sometimes it could be the hardest thing to get volunteers onto. Some of us blame, like, dude, no volunteers are coming through the leadership pipeline. No volunteers are coming doing this, doing that, doing this. But the point is that you need to be responsible for building your team, and you need to be responsible for stewarding the people who are coming onto the team as well. So are my volunteers serving consistently, and are they involved in other areas? The other thing is Sunday executed consistently? Is Sunday executed consistently? Where are our weak spots? How can I sit down on Monday and go review what we did on Sunday and coach and give feedback and give clarity and be willing to tell people, hey, that's not how we do what we do. We do it this way. Hey, when you did this, I'd rather see that. Hey, when you do that, you do this. I think a lot of times we try to like write off feedback and coaching as like us being harsh on volunteers, or a lot of times we think, like if I give this feedback to my volunteer, they're going to quit. And we have this fear of giving feedback, where majority of the time when you give feedback, people say, wow, thank you. I've never heard that before. I've never even thought to think the way that you're thinking, because no one's ever given me the feedback to even think at the level that you're thinking or the perspective that you're giving me. So you got to be able to give people perspective. You got to be able to give people those handles of feedback. And again, so is Sunday executed consistently? Feedback is going to be one of those major things. Clarity of roles, and then also training. How often am I training my team? Am I providing clarity for what my volunteers are doing, how they do it, and what I expect of it? I feel like you can't over communicate enough. You can't over explain enough how to do something if somebody's doing it the wrong way. Think about when you were like figuring out how to write. If you wrote an A or a B backwards, someone would tell you, hey, that's not how you write a B. A B is written like this, or it's like, you get what I'm saying. So I think if you can't coach your team and say, hey, that's not how we do this thing, I actually want it to be done like this because of X, Y, and Z, then you're able to voice that, then people are just going to keep drawing the B backwards. You know what I mean? And you're like, that's a D. No, it's a B. No, it's actually a D. No, it's a B. And so I think sometimes you have to communicate, you have to tell people with your words and give them the feedback and give them the coaching and remind them of the standard that we're trying to reach and the direction that we're trying to go. So is Sunday executed consistently? Those three things, feedback, coaching, and clarity, are the three things that I would do to make Sunday more consistent from an execution standpoint. And then the last thing too is a measure of success is asking your pastor, leadership, or whatever, hey, is our team supporting the mission and direction of the church? I think it's not just about Sundays. I think Sundays, to be fair, and I think this is a scary statement for some people, but to be fair, Sunday is the most important thing that a church does. It's the gathering of the saints. It's the word, like everyone gathers together. They worship together. The word of God is being preached. Sunday is where church happens. And then obviously, I think discipleship, small groups are also like the next most important thing, is for people to actually be discipled in what is all going on. I'm a very, very big fan of both Sunday and small groups. But then I know that majority of churches, dude, they do a lot of different events. There's 14 billion different events. And so I think being able to have the conversation with your pastor or your supervisor, your leader, and asking like, hey, first and foremost, what are our priorities as a church? If your pastor says, hey, Sunday is the priority, Sunday is the thing that we do, then everything that you do can be filtered through that lens. Now, I'm not saying that you could just say, nope, I'm not doing youth. Nope, I'm not doing women's night. Nope, I'm not doing this or that or whatever. That's not it. But I think it's filtered through the perspective of Sunday. So if what I'm being asked to do affects Sunday after pastor, whoever supervisor has communicated that Sunday is the thing that we do, then everything kind of filters from that perspective and from that kind of frame point. Does that make sense? And so I think, again, asking, am I supporting the direction and the vision and mission of where we're going, is very important for you to stay aligned with your team, to make sure that your team is in alignment and that you are headed in the right direction. And I think too, what's also critically important with that is our team supporting not just what happens on Sunday, but is it supporting the kids ministry, the prison ministry, the youth ministry, whatever else it looks like, groups, worship, all these are so many different parts and pieces that make up a church, so many departments and things like that. But is production, because oftentimes production is the thing that is interwoven between all the things. And so is production supporting not just the mission and vision of the pastor and what we're doing, but is it supporting all areas of our church? And how could it improve in other areas? So if you feel like, you know what, I'm absolutely killing it, Sunday is awesome, I got nothing I need to improve, I'm actually the best production director you've ever seen in your entire life, I think I would go to other staff members and ask, hey, how can I help support you with what you're doing in kids or with what you're doing in youth? And I think that collaboration ultimately makes a team a billion times stronger to be able to continue to grow and multiply and steward what you've been given. Okay. So those three things I think are measures of success. Do my volunteers serve consistently? Is Sunday executed consistently? Am I supporting the direction and mission and vision of the church? Okay, I think that is where I would define as a production director. Like I said, to recap really quickly, production is essentially this balance between leadership and execution. And then let's throw a third wrench in there. The third wrench is